Welcome to Peter and Ruffy's football show, sponsored by Indigo Communications. I'm Peter Martin. Hugh MacDonald is with me here. It would be probably, if I was doing my job properly, pertinent of me to say, and we'll be able to join Ruffy live in Cuba. But
can you imagine it?
But the last thing you want to do, Hugh, is just see Ruffy sitting there in a cocktail.
Yeah, so you don't want to see Ruffy with his shirt off unless you've got a harpoon gun.
Yes. So there's no chance of us even getting him on the phone. But nevertheless, he's decided his season's over. He's off.
He called it early, didn't he?
Oh, he did call it early, as he usually does. But nevertheless, great to have you here. We've got lots to talk about. Absolutely, so many things to cram in. And I can tell you, coming up this week, maybe the start of next week, we've got a brilliant one-to-one with the Scotland manager, Steve Clarke. Really interesting to hear his thoughts on the management, how he's handling it international, his style of play, the players that he's had, his thoughts on the future of the game. He's always entertaining, Steve Clarke. I really like him. I've got a lot of time for him.
So that I think he's really refreshing when he gets things wrong as well. He looks back and, in international says, "Well, I could have done it differently." But I had a conversation once, Peter, just about coaching. Who he's coached for. And see the people that he's coached for. Yeah. Like Kenny Dalglish, Bobby Robson, Ruud Gullit.
Yeah.
Benitez, Mourinho. It's some CV. Yeah. And these are all guys who don't keep on people just to keep the dressing room cheery or, whatever. These are guys that want top-class coaches on board. And, his CV is really remarkable.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm glad you mentioned that, because we do touch on the coaching and how he wants the football to be played, and he gives us his view on Scottish football and where it is now, and the clubs and what they've achieved.
A good thinker about it, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, the other thing is a lot of respect for him. He doesn't hold back when anybody steps out of line. So really well worth staying with us for one-to-ones over the month of June. Like Hugh, when you've got spare time, you can actually crack on and go out and chat to people that you want to speak to in football.
Oh yeah, it's great. I love the podcast for the one-to-ones. Great for just earphones on, nice wee walk round the park, good crack, good chat. So I'm looking forward to Clarke, because he always speaks well about football, and he's always frank, not only with the situation about where he might have come up short, etc., etc. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, you can download on the podcast as well. Thank you to the thousands of people this season who've downloaded the podcast. No matter where Hugh and I and Ruffy and everybody on our travels meet up with fans who say they either watch it on YouTube, subscribe to it, or indeed listen on the podcast as well. So thank you to each and every one of you. So with that in mind, might as well get into the meat and bones of what we want to talk about. And one of the key issues here is last night, the playoff. I love the playoffs because it keeps us all interested right to the very end. And suddenly, St Johnstone come up trumps. And I think it's fair to say Inverness just ran out of gas.
Yeah, and the system's set up that way, isn't it? Billy Dodds made that point very difficult for a championship team to beat the Premiership team in a playoff, given the amount of games they have. And of course, there's no secret as to why that exists, because the Premiership clubs would not vote any other way, But I think the real story from last night is that, at Christmas, St Johnstone looked in a real bad state, and Callum Davidson acted pretty decisively and changed it around. And I'll be interested to see what he does in the summer window, because the last summer window was poor for them because they lost players late, couldn't replace them, coming off the back of a very good season. So perhaps a motivation to change everything wasn't there. But he's losing players now. He's got the situation that he knows how near they sailed to the precipice this season, and I think he'll be a busy man in the transfer window.
Yeah, this is what he had to say at the end of the game, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on his future, because he said, for me, this was a lot harder to achieve. It was a test of character. It was a test of how we went about our business day to day. In the first half, we were garbage. I can't repeat what I said at half time. Goals changed games, and it changed it for us. It was a bigger achievement today. I don't normally celebrate goals too much, but you saw the emotion in me. Some of the performances weren't good, but we're still in the Premiership. Well, I think those words are ominous for some people who just won't cut it. And I think he'll be ruthless, because a lot of these players, I think, he may well believe rested on the laurels of the double cup. And then maybe some that he put faith in that just didn't come up to the standard.
And some of them got a lot of miles on the clock as well. So I think it's a mixture of all the above. I mean, there's bright spots coming. Callum Henry coming back from loan, and
what about his goal? I mean, the goal from him and Rooney, the delicate chip, fantastic.
And Henry has scored 9 goals, I think, for St Johnstone in the second half of the season. Every one of those goals is gold plated. If you're scoring goals for a team in the relegation area, every one of them is a cracker. I mean, last night's one was a topper, but you know what I mean. Every goal is really, really significant. So there's positive. There's positive.
You took me back to 5th year there, Hugh. I haven't heard it was a topper since I was in 5th year at school. That's magic.
It was great the way goals were once described. I always remember reading a Sunday Post when I was a kid, and the headline was "What a rip snorter."
Yes.
And I went, what?
I mean, rip snorter, stramash, topper. These are all brilliant phrases. You just don't hear.
There's a lot of phrases in terms. We're going off at a tangent here, but in newspapers at one time, there's a lot of phrases that nobody ever used, but newspapers that everybody, they used to, and even I wrote it in my early days when I was centre half, you described them as a pivot.
Yes.
I just said nobody ever walked into a pub and somebody used the word pivot in regard to a centre half. The newspaper telling. So a topper.
Yeah.
People might remember the old Topper magazine.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure there's a lot of people who watch this programme who definitely remember those things. But absolutely, it reminds me when we used to play marbles as well, and that's a ticker. Do you remember that? You see,
Jories, we called it. Jories.
What did you call it?
Jories.
Jories. That's even before my time. Excellent. Fantastic.
That was just before the wheel.
Yeah, so absolutely. Listen, a lot of people are worried here, Hugh, and thank you to so many of you who've offered your own tuppence worth on this. Super Ali, this is a lovely lady who says, Ruffy doesn't respect PLZ. I think that's a very good, very good. Ruthless, but absolutely right. Thanks to Anne Wood for joining us. And Stuart Ramsey's just said, afternoon, Peter, who's that in the suit? And quite a lot of people think that you have obviously been to court to state your case and see if you've managed to get bail.
I've got bail because I'm here. It's the old answer to the question, what do you call Hugh MacDonald in a suit? The accused.
Yes. So, thanks to so many of you who've mentioned what he's wearing today. I think he's just thinking to himself, I'll be smart for the last show of the season. Not for us, we've got till Friday, but your last one. You've enjoyed it, Hugh, haven't you?
Oh, yeah, I've had a terrific. I think it's been a terrific season. One of the things as well is I travelled for my day job for the newspaper. I travelled doing lower league generally football. I was on the road.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was in the lower league. I went to Qatar to do the Arab Cup, and I went to Seville before Rangers got there, and I went to, where else? Liverpool, and the other beat there I was down at Birmingham. But a lot of the time I was at places like Cumnock for New Cumnock for Glenafton. At the weekend there I was at View Park for Thorneywood. Yeah. Which was terrific. So I've been all about. I was up at Fraserburgh, Banks of Dee. I've had a great season, and I've had a season where I've actually watched and experienced what football really means to people.
Yeah,
to people.
Is it difficult to say, or is it tough to call it that this could be probably your most enjoyable year as a journalist?
Oh, that's a good shout. Yeah, certainly in terms of matches, yes.
Yeah,
I would say so. That's a good point. I never thought of it that way, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah, absolutely, because you got that freedom to go and do things and speak to interesting people. It's something that I think we all like to do, especially on PLZ. Is if I get the spare time to go and get interesting people in and listen to them, Pat Nevin, Gordon Strachan, Jamie Murphy, come on, James McPake.
I was going to say James McPake, who might be as we've understood, might be getting back in the game in jig time, which is good.
Which is great. And thanks to so many of you. Tommy Adams says, the topper was a broadsheet in my day.
It was. I remember it was a big broad. It was in my day.
Is that right?
It wasn't like the Victor or, what was the other one? The Victor and the Hotspur.
Yeah.
Which were quite wee. The topper was a...
Was it? Wow, that is...
He's of my age.
I'm just telling you, that's exactly what people know. They're all over it. And also, we've got one here. It's a guy called Hugh MacDonald's lawyer who says, tell him I need my shirt back and tell him to iron it. Scathing, but nevertheless, let's talk about Scotland, because the good thing is, Hugh, just on the fact that you get the chance to go and sit down and chat with people. I had a great sit down yesterday with Steve Clarke, and the Scotland manager was brilliant, just a one-to-one, and it's going out probably maybe the end of this week, start of next week, definitely before the end of the month. And it's basically Steve Clarke just talking about his time as manager of Scotland, the players, the way he wants to play, the game coming up against Ukraine, obviously the future of Scottish football, and of course his thoughts on club football this season, and Rangers reaching the Europa League final. So really an interesting one. He's one of those guys, Hugh, that I could have probably spent a good hour, because there were so many other things I wanted to ask him, but obviously when you get Darryl sitting there, tapping his watch, you think, will I get up here and bang him, or will I just keep trying to get as many questions in as possible?
Go and get your cars clamped.
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing worse than somebody in the PR going, looking at you, and you're thinking, okay, I'll sneak in two more. But he was good listening.
Oh, he was. I interviewed him during the pandemic on Zoom, and I just wanted to ask him about coaching. What he'd learned and who he'd learned it from, and he went through the list. Peter, Bobby Robson, Ruud Gullit, Kenny Dalglish, Benitez, Mourinho, just what he'd learned from all of them, what he put in himself, what he didn't like. And absolutely deadpan. I mean, the thing I like about him is he doesn't kid on about, there's no false obsequiousness or anything. He's just straight as a die. I did this, I did that, I did this, I wouldn't do that again, I would do that again. And if you're interested in football at all, and we're all, anybody watches this show obviously, by definition, is interested in football. But Clarke offers you a wee peek into how the top players work, how you got to react to top players, how you got to manage top players, which has changed dramatically.
And the other thing about it as well, I'm glad you said deadpan there, because I actually had some really good laughs with him yesterday. We were able to have a good laugh and give you a little insight into the perception and the reality, as ever, with so many people, is different.
Oh, he's very dry.
Yeah,
very dry humour. He told me a great story about when he was coaching for Kenny at Liverpool, and Kenny more or less, he let him do the coaching. But Kenny always had the final decision, and they had this big meeting at the beginning of the week to play 3-5-2. So they did all the set pieces, 3-5-2, everything. And the Saturday, we're playing Chelsea in London, and the Saturday morning, just after the players' breakfast, they take them in and they show them clips how they're going to play 3-5-2. And Kenny walks in and looks and goes, "Do you know what?" Steve says, "What?" He says, "I think we'll play 4-4-2." And they did. And Stephen says, it worked, we won 1-0. And that's all that mattered. He says, but that is how quickly it changed. And it taught him as a coach that he has to adapt quickly as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, great story, Kenny.
Great story. He announced his squad yesterday as well. Hugh, here's the squad. And I think, to be perfectly honest with you, when you look at the goalkeepers there, Zander Clarke, Craig Gordon, Liam Kelly, David Marshall. You've got Liam Cooper, Grant Hanley, Jack Henry, Aaron Hickey's in there, Scott McKenna, Stephen O'Donnell, Nathan Patterson, Anthony Ralston, and then you get Andy Robertson, Suter, Taylor, Armstrong, Ferguson, Gilmore, Jack, McGinn, McGregor, Scott McTominay, David Turnbull, Che Adams, Jacob Brown, Ryan Christie, Lyndon Dykes and Ross Stewart. Now, interestingly enough, obviously the glaring omission there, and I think it's a blow, is Kieran Tierney, who's not in, and even although he plays in this three on the left side, I do think in a strange sort of way we still see the benefits of him when he's playing, because he still manages to get up the park, still is a threat.
He's the only overlapping centre-back in the world. I mean, seriously, he overlaps at centre-back. So, yeah, I mean, he'll be a great miss for the team, not only just in his playing ability, but his character, his experience, the way the way he galvanised a team. So yeah, I mean, the easy answer is to say, well, on the left-hand side we've got a world-class player in Andy Robertson, and that's the easy answer. But we'll still miss Tierney, and I think in a 3 as well with Tierney, it might impact on the team because, I mean, in selection, because would you now place McTominay back in the 3 rather than place him in midfield? That's now an option, a very strong option for Steve Clarke. Although when you look at the squad, Peter, there's a lot of guys have put their hand up recently. I mean, Hanley at one point was almost a figure of ridicule amongst some fans.
Yeah,
he's a good. Jack Henry, another guy who was slaughtered from pillar to post, his hand up. I think there's and John Souttar has come back fit as well.
Yeah.
So he's got more options there than maybe he had, certainly had for the Euros.
Yeah, apart from anything else, I think the other worry that a lot of Scotland fans will be looking at is the Champions League final, because Andy Robertson is going to play in it. What does the manager think of Robertson playing Champions League final and then June 1st against Ukraine?
I think when you play the amount of games that Liverpool have this season, or the top clubs play, when you go to the final stages of all the competitions, which is what Liverpool have done, they're going to play a lot of games. The players are fit, they understand what's needed physically and mentally to prepare for the game, so no doubts about Andy.
Yeah, no surprise to get no doubts about Robertson. Robertson had played through a brick wall.
Peter, you're talking about that on the road feature I was doing. I was travelling all over Europe and beyond. Actually, I went to Qatar for the Arab Cup. I went down to Liverpool, and it was that big main stand that I've watched. It's like looking straight down the park. And I made a point. I just watch Robertson. You know how you do that sometimes?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I watched Robertson.
I did that for 7 years with Dalglish.
Robertson, I'm not kidding you. I mean, I would love to have known his figures from that game.
Yeah.
Number of sprints, metres covered, everything. I mean, at one point he tracked so far back to stop one on the line. He was just incredible. And I was talking to Liverpool supporters afterwards, and I was kind of blown away with the whole thing. And they were saying, "Nah, that's just him. That was his usual. That was his 7 out of 10 performance today." And I went, "Goodness gracious."
Yeah, I'll tell you another thing, Hugh, which is a bonus for us, is quite simply, when Steve Clarke started in the job, I asked him, I was out at a dinner one night with him, and I asked him about the fact that there was, we were thin on the ground with centre halves, thin on the ground with a right back and various other positions up front. But suddenly, slowly but surely, players started to emerge. He started to scout players that potentially could play for us. And then you suddenly get players who have moved on to clubs and started to blossom. Ralston, Ross Stewart, great season for him. And you look at those players and you think, and you're hoping that obviously Billy Gilmore and Nathan Patterson start to see lots more football. But he made an interesting point yesterday to me, which I think is very pertinent to the way we're going, which is the average age of the side now is young enough that the next 3 tournaments, the nucleus of this side is there.
That's a terrific point. I think I was looking at when it came out this morning, the squad, I was looking at it pretty carefully, going through it, and I was like surprised at the strength again, particularly amongst the centre backs, where we touched on that before in the programme, because we've always been really strong in midfield. We've got a really good midfield, and the 2 places where we were kind of iffy, which was central defence and up front, are much stronger than they were even 18 months ago. Adams now looks a viable option. He really looks a touch of class in that sort of second striker role. Dykes has exceeded all expectations, for me. And when you've got McGinn, who's able, the goals that McGinn's providing, and again, to go back to my travels, I was down at Villa the other week there, and again, I thought McGinn was absolutely outstanding. But I was talking to Villa fans after the game. He said, "No, that was roughly just the way he's been playing all season." He says he's been our best player all season, and he looked terrific and dangerous up front as well.
Yeah, of course, all eyes will be on the game against Ukraine. Can we get past them? It will be an emotional game. The manager's obviously got his work cut out just to try and detach the players from the huge groundswell of sympathy and backing and support for Ukraine as a nation. But of course, the players, the Ukrainian manager has been able to get the players away, get them organised, get them together to prepare for this game. So Steve Clarke's under no illusions how tough this one's going to be.
We all understand and respect the position of the Ukrainian team. Fortunately for them, they've managed to get out of the country, they've managed to get the players into a training camp, they've been playing matches. They'll be ready for the game. The most important thing for me as the Scotland head coach is that I have to make sure that we're ready for the game, and we'll be ready. So both teams ready to go on the 1st of June.
Yeah, I mean, it's a point that I think some people will obviously have to think about. When you get to a situation where you're caught up in the emotion of, something to do with the squad, or, in this case, a war which has totally and utterly ravaged the Ukraine, and then suddenly, you want to play sport. It's a difficult one, and Scotland at times, I think, had to tread carefully in how they, put themselves across in this.
Absolutely, and the SFA get lambasted all the time, sometimes properly so.
Yeah.
But they've really handled this well. They've really said, no, we're not pushing for a date. We're part of talks where a date will come in. We're not demanding that by such and such a date we must have played this tie, or that it could be forfeited. They played it straight down the middle and said, listen, let's see what accommodation we can come to and all that. Clarke's language has been exemplary. I mean, because there are points where he could say, wait a minute, the Ukraine situation is dreadful. I mean, it's beyond words.
Yeah.
But for the players, for a sporting sense, that you almost, it's almost how best to describe this? There's positives in that the players have stayed together. They're away from all that.
Yeah.
So they've had great, preparation time. Plus the motivation. Can you imagine what the motivation would be if you're a Ukrainian player at the moment? And I know we say, there's a danger of trivialising all this through football. I don't mean it that way. But sport is so important to people. And the footballers will be hearing all this stuff from their friends or their relatives, everybody back in their own country that are so supportive of them. So their motivation will be through the roof. It's a difficult tie for Scotland to manoeuvre on and off the park, Peter.
Yeah, I think Scotland can win this one. I'm not so sure about the Wales match because I think they have one world-class player. I don't think they've got two. I know that's slightly contentious. I think if Ramsey's playing, he's going to be playing less than 100% fit, and I don't think he's world-class, but I do think Bale's world-class.
Oh, aye, Bale's...
Do you think Ramsey's world-class? I've heard some people say it.
I think it was at one time.
Do you?
Yeah, I think when he was when he and Bale played together and the Welsh team together, I thought he was absolutely superb.
What's your term of world class, you?
He would get
a world class player is a player who is consistent and can walk into any side and also makes the difference in games. That for me is a world class player.
I think he would tick those boxes at one time.
Yeah.
I mean, when he left Arsenal, he could have went to any team in Europe. Every team wanted him. I mean, to such an extent that Juventus offered him the fabled £400,000 a week.
Yeah.
Where he is now, I still think he could be a real threat to Scotland.
I think he can be.
And I think Wales, beyond Bale and Ramsey, and Bale is, I think, undoubtedly, I mean, Bale's a guy who scores worldies in Champions League finals. I mean, that's what he does. So I think beyond Bale and Ramsey, there is a question mark over there. They're a strong, decent team.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, Peter, is it's gone nearer with the Scotland games. I'm usually very pessimistic.
Yeah, you're getting optimistic.
Yeah, as it gets nearer, and I see this morning when I was looking at that squad, I went, do you know what? That's a pretty decent squad to take on Ukraine and Wales. Hopefully, Wales.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you to so many people who obviously have messages, and we try and read out as many as possible. And of course, obviously bearing in mind that not everybody is of a certain age who can read your messages, and obviously if they're not of a certain age where they can vote, the last thing we want is any profanities. It's as simple as that. So you know what I'm like, you. I've been consistent all season. I try and tell people to behave on the feed and not to swear and not to obviously be abusive. So I think the general feeling is that quite a lot of the people who actually contribute to our feed have been absolutely top draw. So I want to thank all of you for your contributions. Obviously, every now and then we always mention to everybody that we try to the best of our ability to cut out and ban anybody, even if it's for a short period of time, so they can conduct themselves properly. So Scotland, yes to Ukraine. If I'm dreading penalties with Wales, because Tam McManus thinks Ramsey will step up and knock us out.
Well, that's sport for you, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'll wait and see how Ukraine goes first. I'll do the old manager, take one game at a time.
Right.
I think I watched Ukraine under Shevchenko at Hampden. They've already won recently at Hampden, haven't they? When they beat Sweden in the Euros. I was at that match. I thought they were much the second best team that day, but what I did see in them that day was, again, a huge will to win. I saw glimpses of, real top class, maybe not world class, but top class, certainly in guys like Zinchenko, the fullback, Man City fullback. I saw organisation as well, so they'll not lie down, that's for sure.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, you can give us your view. Who's going to win that one against Ukraine? And can Scotland, if they get past Ukraine, then go on to take care of Wales as well? Fingers crossed. I know Ruffy will be absolutely pushing hard for us all to head out to... You're going to Qatar anyway. The difficulty is if we do end up going to the World Cup in Qatar, Ruffy and myself are adopting what I would call the typical West of Scotland attitude, is we're booking our flights and then we're in the same room as you. We don't care if it's tight. It's a Morecambe and Wise moment. There's 5 guys in a bed, and how you sleep is how you sleep.
Exactly, head to toe, and all luggage into a plastic carrier bag. That's all. But Ruffy, I don't know if Ruffy will go to one, because then not Ruffy's holidays round about that time as well.
He likes to go in November and December as well. Yeah, absolutely. 4 holidays in the year, which in my day, Hugh, was Burnt Island, Ayr, and then at a push. I'm trying to think of where else did we go on holiday.
You'd go to Rothsay.
Rothsay's another one.
I always remember I went to Girvan on holidays.
That's the 4. I'm happy with that 4. Listen, I never got your thoughts on this, Hugh, and a lot of people have been talking about it on our feed. You were on last Tuesday or Monday, and then we had the Europa League final, and then we've had the Scottish Cup. It's mixed emotions for Rangers. In the end, they couldn't quite get past Eintracht Frankfurt. Were you in the least bit surprised it went to penalties?
No, I wasn't surprised. I thought it would be a tight game. I thought Rangers might squeak it, actually. But I wasn't surprised. I mean, it was so tight. Rangers had already beaten, I think, in the league table, the Bundesliga table, I'll tell you, 2 better German teams in Leipzig and Dortmund. So I wasn't surprised it went close. I was surprised about some of the stuff that happened on the night. I thought Lundstrom's comment, see when you interview a player right after the game, sometimes he's not got time to compose himself and think of the party line.
Yeah.
And he was, he basically, he was talking about nerves and letting the fans down. And, a lot of people reacted to that. Of course you didn't let the fans down, and understandably. But I think there'll be a lot of Rangers players thinking, do you know what, we didn't fully come up to the mark in that final. I'm thinking about, of all the players in that team, I think the only one who, could sort of exceeded expectations on the night, or, played at the really highest level, was Bassey.
Yeah.
Every other,
Well, every Rangers fan that I've spoken to has mentioned the fact that they thought it was James Taverneir's poorest game. Now, I would counter that by saying sometimes you have a poor game because the guy you're playing against is pushing you back the way, and Kostic, I thought, was superb.
Yeah, but you could see that the Germans had very quickly and properly identified the attacking threat of Rangers would come through their fullbacks, and the Rangers fullbacks really didn't have an impact, offensively on the game. In fact, Rangers offensively didn't make many chances. I mean, the goal was a defensive header. It was a mistake, and it took to extra time before we got that great chance for Ken.
Yeah,
and that was when a centre forward came on.
No surprise, this whole season, usually on this programme, there's always been, and here is a statement, and Rangers have released a statement. So you might as well read it out. It's just come out. Rangers are in dialogue with both UEFA and Football Supporters Europe regarding the issues encountered by our supporters. Supporters wishing to make a complaint to UEFA should be aware that UEFA has no direct grievance procedures for supporters. We would recommend that supporters contact FSE via their away supporters survey, which can be obviously accessed at the links that Rangers have put in there. But basically, Rangers are saying they're immensely proud of the supporters for the spirit and character they've shown following our club in recent numbers, in record numbers, I beg your pardon. Our fans went to Seville and wowed locals with colour, noise and positivity and showed the true character of Rangers. Although the result didn't go our way, we will remember the build-up to the match with great fondness. And the statement goes on to say, however, we have major concerns around the treatment of our supporters at the Ramon Sanchez Pizjuan Stadium, including the confiscation of previously approved and agreed items that were confiscated by the police and a lack of appropriate facilities within the stadium, including the lack of bottled water or indeed water in the toilets, which understandably caused severe distress to many supporters in the stadium. And Rangers are in dialogue regarding these issues that the supporters encountered. And I think they've got a strong point there, Hugh, because, a lot of my mates were saying you couldn't even go to the taps because they turned them off at one point. And the other aspect of which I didn't think about at the time, but one of my mates who's a Rangers fan, is a builder, says, and you weren't sure where the water was coming from anyway. Yeah. It could have been a tank that's, not exactly, clean. Right. And that was another aspect of it. But more importantly, there was two things that really worried me. One is they're taking bottled water off them before they get into the stadium, which I think is just stupid because you know exactly what's going on in the stadium. It's really hot. And the second part of it is Spanish police don't mess about, by the way, Hugh. And, some of the pictures are disturbing. I think a lot of fans, and some fans who are just going there to enjoy themselves, they get the sharp end of a stick.
Aye, but that is the way the Spanish police react. Remember too that these Spanish police would all be in briefings beforehand saying, this is a high risk fixture. These Spanish police as well would have been, some of them would have been on patrol when Frankfurt were last in town, and that ended up in fights with West Ham in the Plaza de España.
Yeah.
So they'd be on the front foot, to put it.
But it's not as if they don't know. It's not as if, apart from anything else, Hugh, the main problems, dehydration, and a lot of people, suffering because they couldn't get water. It's not as if the authorities in Spain don't know the climate and the facilities you need to get a 5-star stadium with 5-star facilities. And
yeah,
that
absolutely.
one clearly wasn't.
And this, you'll find that rather than being a Spanish problem, I think you'll find this is a UEFA problem, because you and I know once these events are taken to certain grounds, UEFA take over. It doesn't become the SFA's Hampden, it doesn't become Seville's Ramon Pizjuan, it becomes UEFA. They'll put up barriers, footfall barriers outside, and you'll know.
Yeah, but listen, banners and logos are one thing. Facilities is another.
But as I'm saying, you'll probably find that if it had been left to the club to organise facilities, I think there's been a gap here between the communication between club and UEFA, what's needed, what we had to have.
Why award them it in the first place if there's a gap? The gap is the gap shouldn't be there, because if you say I have a 5-star standard stadium, then you are awarded a final. Yeah. So UEFA officials have long ago a chance to go in and say, this has been awarded 5 stars. What are the facilities like? It's going to be 36 degrees. Can the Rangers fans and the Eintracht Frankfurt fans access water? And what are the stipulations about going into the stadium? Now, all of those things seem to have been, thrown up there. Just forget about it. We'll do it.
But that's what I'm saying. I think that's been a UEFA problem. The reason I say that is that I was at the West Ham game in that stadium.
Yeah.
Sellout. And such was absolute sellout and big travelling West Ham support. Very little problem getting into the stadium. I was careful, because I knew it was a high risk fixture at West Ham, but there was no extraordinary search. And when I was in, it was just like a normal game. You went up and there was a queue for I actually went and bought water. There's queues for it and that, but not mad queues. So everyone was functioning perfectly well for a quarter-final tie with the same amount of fans. So why it didn't function well for a final, I think the questions has to ask of UEFA, and they will be asked of UEFA.
Yeah, I know a lot of Rangers, I think some of the Rangers squad were throwing bottles of water up towards the fans, which is a disgrace. Anyway, I think Rangers have a legitimate case, and UEFA have got some explaining to do. Other little point, the Scottish Cup, I personally thought Rangers deserved to win it. I thought they were at it. They had the best chances, dominated the match. I was disappointed with what Hearts had to offer, other than their goalkeeper, who yet again produced a world-class save to keep them in it.
Yeah, that would be my summation. Is totally Rangers, and again, Rangers in extra time actually coming on stronger even. Yeah. But it was Rangers dominance. I was at Thorneywood United, so the big game of the day.
Yeah.
So I recorded it and I watched it later that night. And apart from that Sims chance early on, did you ever think Hearts were going to score?
I thought they were absolutely poor. Didn't really offer anything. And if you are going to go to a final, you've got to, all guns blazing. If you get thumped, you get thumped. But all guns blazing, at least threaten the goal. And I didn't see that. Some emotional little touches that we'll touch on. Of course, if you're going to wave goodbye, come on the last 2 minutes and wave goodbye. Alan McGregor, I think he will leave Rangers with his head held high. Tam McManus thinks he's the best Rangers goalkeeper ever. You are slightly more long in the tooth.
Yeah, of all the goalkeepers, I would say it was between him and Gorham. I would go for Gorham, and I think I would go for Gorham because there was one season, I think it was 92-93 season, when Rangers got to what was termed the semi-finals of the Champions League, and they were one match away from the final. I thought he was unbeatable that season. He was just doing daft things. He was just like incredible saves. I once watched him in that season or the season afterwards playing against Portugal at Ibrox in a match at Ibrox, and Futre was clear through and goal, and there was hardly a murmur in the crowd. I was just says he'll save us, and he did.
Yeah.
That's how good he was. So I'd put him still just ahead of McGregor.
Yep. Okay. Celtic, Carter-Vickers. Looks as if it's close to a deal there. I think that will please many. The general consensus among our pundits, yourself included, and myself, is that if anything, Carter-Vickers was the real priority rather than Jota. No disrespect to the player.
Yep, and I think, we've talked about it before that, league campaigns are won on defensive records, and Celtic there's always this narrative that, Celtic can't defend, etc., etc. Celtic are the best defence in Scotland. Statistics show that, and Carter-Vickers was central to that. I think the Celtic fans will be really keen to get him over the line, and so will Ange Postecoglou, because he's such a linchpin. He and Starfelt have really proved a top-class partnership at the heart of the defence.
Yeah, I don't think too many people would have said that at the start of the season. But they've warmed to it. I'm going to be fair to the lad, Hugh. I still think every now and then he's a bomb scare, but he has, in the last quarter, I think, really stepped up to the plate. I'm talking, of course, about Starfelt. Right. He really has stepped up there, and you've got to. And I think sometimes we live in a world of knee-jerk reaction. You have a view on somebody and you stick to it, and it takes a hell of a long time before you switch. And I think he deserves great credit. Although Carter-Vickers has come in and just been solid all the time.
Yeah, and I think the extent is, you know, you can say about Starfelt and Carter-Vickers is that, you know, Julian, who's done, you know, really well at Celtic, is the forgotten man now, and it looks as if he might be leaving Celtic Park. I think the club would probably entertain offers for him.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Players that get deals. I have to say, sometimes, Hugh, I think once I always mention this. I think once legislation comes in and it forces people on any social media platform to have their own name, it will be a step forward, because then you, if you've got an opinion worth its salt, then quite simply you have to use your own name. And I wonder if that will come to YouTube. Although even if it takes a wee bit of time, I still have some names that make me chuckle. And this one, obviously, your comment about Celtic having the best record in domestic football. But someone says, Peter, tell Hugh Celtic had the worst defensive record in Europa League 2 seasons in a row. So he wanted to make that point, but his handle is Peter Martin's Doug Henrik. which I think you've got to give him a bit of credit for that, by the way.
Yeah, the Europa League, to all intents and purposes, Europa League did not matter to Celtic last season. What mattered to Celtic is winning the league. And how Celtic won the league, central to what Celtic won the league, was having the lowest number of goals conceded. Having a defence that they could rely on with Celtic was absolutely crucial to Celtic bouncing back. And everybody could talk about Europa League and Europa Conference League and Champions League qualifiers with Rangers, whatever you want. But if you're talking about the league, Celtic had the best defence in the league.
Yeah. Okay, another little story that came out today. Hugh Fraser-Forster looks as if he's going to be the number 2 to Hugo Lloris at Spurs. It's not a bad career now, just being the number 2 everywhere, is it?
Well, certainly the money get. But I just want, I mean, old timers like me could say they could be looking forward to a season of Champions League football with Celtic, right?
Yeah.
Or you could be looking forward to warming the bench behind Lloris, because Lloris is going to be pretty damn hard to drop. Listen, I'm not making any great point about it, because he'll be making money hand over fist for his family in this. And he'll be looking at himself and saying, do you know what, if I get a chance, I could be the Tottenham number 1 goalkeeper. But it just shows you the changing dynamics of players nowadays, that sometimes opportunities to play at the highest level come second than the opportunities just to join a big club.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking at David Marshall signing for Hibs. I think it's a good deal, because if you're going to try and build a half-decent side, I always think it's not rocket science. Start with the spine.
Talked about that before. I mean, central again to Celtic this season as well has been heart and goal. Just spreading confidence about it, and having that ability to make that one save every now and again. Marshall is a great organiser of a defence as well. Incredible experience Dave Marshall's got. I mean, Dave Marshall goes back to, you know, the siege of Barcelona, through Premier League in England, etc., etc. I think he'll do well there.
Yeah, so do I. 37, no age for a goalkeeper, because
anyway.
Obviously, well, in some cases, 3, 4 years, you've still got some good earning capacity. But I think it's a good signing for Hibs. I think he'll do well. Interestingly enough, they've added Leeds United midfielder Nohan Kennett on a 3-year deal, youngster. We'll see how he develops as well. But it'll be interesting to see the connections and the recruitment that Lee Johnson adopts for Hibernian. He's played in the league, knows a wee bit about it. I wonder if he's going to get the control that Sean Maloney was denied.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be crucial, because nowadays, in the old days pre-Bosman, Peter, teams could stay the same for 2 or 3 years. Nowadays, teams don't stay that way, because contracts are all important, because they run down and players can leave. Yeah. And a lot of contracts are very, very short. The norm outside the Premiership would be 10-month contracts, literally, not even years, 10 months. So there's a great turnaround in players, so he'll have to put his mark on it right away.
Yeah. One player who thought he was going to Dundee and then decided to change his mind is Ricky Lamie, who's decided to sign a new contract at Motherwell. He must have had what I call one of those clauses in the contract to say, if you get relegated, I'm not coming.
Yeah, he's obviously his agent his agent's done him a turn there, put that into the clause and allowed him to stay on at Motherwell.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, you can give us your thoughts on your team and where you think they need strength. And coming up shortly, we will reveal your view, your votes on who you think deserves Manager of the Year, Player of the Year and Young Player of the Year. We put it out there across our social media, gathered in all the votes, and eventually we've got 3 people chosen, and we'll reveal that shortly for you. Another little story which I'm delighted, James McPake will go in and follow John Hughes as the Dunfermline manager. Delighted. I think it's a great appointment. Mm-hmm. I think James, to be perfectly honest with you, was given the short end of the stick at Dundee.
Oh yeah, but what an experience he's had at Dundee as well, because all painful experiences, they make you stronger, and they make you a bit sharper and wiser as well. You know, the hardest lessons are always painful ones, or the best lessons, I should say, are always painful ones. Great move for him. Dunfermline, I know that was another of my trips this year, was in Dunfermline, and I think it was Yogi's first game. Big crowd, 4,000 or 5,000 there.
It's a club I like, Hugh. Only due to the fact that, you know, as a young reporter at Radio 4, that was my bag. You covered the east of Scotland. Hearts, Hibs, Wraith Rovers and Dunfermline. Because obviously they were predominantly in the top flight or championship at best or at worst. So those 4 clubs were really my bag in the east of Scotland, and it was just a joy to go to because of great managers, and it was a time when you're a reporter, you could sit and have a cup of tea, have a laugh, talk about all the stories and what's going on in football, and you could phone them every morning to find out what was happening.
I know, these were the days. I mean, if you talk about great managers, you know, you go back to the go back to the Steens and the Bert Paytons and Jim Leishmans, and you go.
I'm glad you mentioned Bert. He was a lovely man. He was my first of the managers there.
He was an absolute Dunfermline legend as a player. You know, if he hadn't done anything in management, he'd already been a legend. What a player he was. I like Dunfermline too, because I like Dunfermline because it's a big club. You know, that old big stadium. You rattle up to it and park outside it, and you say to yourself, what is this doing in League One of Scottish football? I mean, come on.
And I mentioned there to you Dunfermline, and then I said Wraith Rovers. Ian Murray's the manager. Yeah. So that was an interesting one, because odds on Kevin Thompson, but they couldn't quite agree the financial aspect of it.
I think they've won a watching Ian Murray anyway, because I watched Airdrie a couple of times this season, and Airdrie were just very unlucky in League One, in that they were coming up against Cove, who were justifiably the champions. Cove had a really good year. Again, people always talk about what they were doing up front with Megason and McAllister, but they had a really strong defence as well. Good midfield, well coached by Gordon Young and of course Paul Hartley. So he was a bit unlucky, because they were, to my mind anyway, they were, you know, a really strong second place team in that. I know they failed in the playoffs, but they were strong and well coached, Airdrie. I think he's obviously enhanced his CV, because he's got a good job on the back of it.
Yeah, well done to him. We wish him all the very best. Possibly towards the end of the season, certainly later than most of the PFA of the football
we waited
writers.
To get the proper one.
We waited to get the proper one, Hugh. We offered nominees for the Manager of the Year, the Player of the Year, the Young Player. So here's the nominees for the Manager of the Year that were out there, 4 of them, and quite simply there can only be one winner, which you decided on, nothing to do with us. So there was Ange Postecoglou, for obvious reasons, a double in his first season as Celtic manager, was one of the candidates. I don't think you can deny the opportunity for Derek McInnes to be involved there, because sometimes you can have all the money, but you've still got to deliver, and he did with Kilmarnock to get them back to the Premiership. Malky Mackay, for me, just an absolute star with a side with a few loan deals and just developing what he had up there at Dingwall. And then Cove Rangers with Paul Hartley. This is a side on the up, and if they are looking again, you wouldn't bet against them going up again in the divisions because of the money they've got. And the winner of it all, well, you decided it was Ange Postecoglou, who got the nod for that double, an incredible season, and I think his catchphrase, "We never stop," pleased so many Celtic fans.
Yeah, and I think it's justifiable given the state Celtic were in when he took over. I think the idea of them winning the league was not quite fanciful, but it was out. I think most people would thought this was a transition season that Ange would bed in, maybe get a cup, and maybe finish 6-9 points behind Rangers. The fact of the matter is he won the first trophy that he could, which I think was really important, gave real momentum to the team. And he won the league, and he won the league well.
Yeah, and over and above that, I think as a manager coming in from a different country, bringing his own thoughts, and also engaging with people. I thought, eventually people started to see the fun side of him, as well as, I think, a side of him which was quite simply he's not going to indulge or get involved in any of this, sometimes rivalry which is, created around Celtic and Rangers. He embraced Giovanni Van Bronckhorst. They went for a coffee together, and you could see there was a genuine warmth because both of them realise how difficult that job is and how you have to conduct yourself and the way that you're portrayed and the way you portray the club.
Absolutely, and there's a real decency in both of them. I think, just veering off to Giovanni Van Bronckhorst, and a very testing season for him, where every game is a is a do or die effort, isn't it, in Scotland? Every interview, fair, honest assessment. So two decent men. Yeah. I think the Postecoglou thing. He's now quite wry about it, isn't he? Saying the only thing he didn't win was the Sack by Christmas award. But that must have, I'm not saying it hurt him, but he must have been thinking about this. He would get a very early indication of the pressure. I mean, it's all right for Ange Postecoglou come and say, well, it's not as if I've never heard of Celtic or I didn't know about it, etc., etc. But he was coming to a situation that's very pressurised. You know that Gordon Strachan, who was immersed in Scottish football, played at Celtic Park, brought up in Scotland. When he got the Celtic manager's job, he was shocked.
Yeah.
By
all-consuming.
He was stunned by it. And he'd managed in the Premier League in England.
Yeah.
So it must have been a huge culture shock, and to adapt to that so quickly. And I think as well, Peter, the recruits that he brought in.
Yeah, they worked out. Listen, we'll skate through these quickly. Here's the Young Player of the Year award, which is 4 nominees in the Young Player category. The first one was Liel Abada for assists and goals scored as well. I mean, it was incredible, his contribution to Celtic, and he's still only 20 years of age. Incredible. Josh Doig, I think, has learned so much from Lewis Stevenson, and that will have enhanced his game and certainly caught the eye in Scottish football. And the third nominee was Calvin Ramsey. Surprised to some, but he's certainly attracting interest. There's a lot of potential in him, but I think there's more to come from Calvin Ramsey, whether it's in the Red of Aberdeen's another thing. And Jay Henderson at 20 in the midfield for St Mirren, and St Mirren comfortably now looking forward to Premiership football. And the winner of the Young Player, according to you from all the votes, is Liel Abada. Any arguments with that, Hugh?
None. To come into a big club like Celtic, play in a high-profile position out in the wing, and to score, at a better rate than 1 in 4, and to be in assists, yeah. And there's a lot more to come from this young man as well. Yeah,
absolutely. Player of the Year nominees, 4 of them in the category, and the first man up is the Celtic captain Callum McGregor, from the midfield, driving them on, and to get the title in his first season as captain. Tremendously inspirational for club and country. Craig Gordon, for me, an absolute star, some top drawer saves and still going strong in his late 30s. And then the third player is another Celtic player, Jota. Assists, goals, contribution, and of course, wouldn't it just make you sick, good looking boy as well. And then the fourth one is Regan Charles Cook, who was an absolute joy, joint top scorer in the division, playing for Ross County no less. And the winner, who got all the votes, the majority of votes in this category, was Callum McGregor. Hugh, outstanding. I said very, very early in the season I thought he was the best midfielder in Scotland, and nothing changed my mind throughout the season.
No, and I think the significant thing about Callum as well is the way he adapted to being captain. This is a huge pressurised season for Celtic. Every game, certainly after the stuttering start, every game was literally a must win, or at least not lose. They went in that 31 game unbeaten record. He got seriously injured, come back and played in the mask. Central to everything that what Ange Postecoglou wants to do in the park. Yeah, I couldn't argue with that.
Yeah, 2 quick points to finish. Erik Ten Hag checked in as Manchester United manager. He's got a blueprint to try and end the dominance of Liverpool and Manchester City. And again, he was quite adamant at the press conference that this is not a risk to his reputation. Really?
I don't see it as a risk. I think this club has a great history, and now, let's make a future. And I'm really exciting to do that with the people around who are in the club. We bring some new people in the staff. We will analyze the squad, and we will go from day to day.
I can't wait to see the way his team is going to play, but I would say the first and foremost, the big job he's got is getting 7 or 8 of them right out the door, who are detrimental to moving forward in a positive sense. Yeah. Pogba's always been my number 1 target. If he wants to go back to Juventus, drive him there.
I think they've got a real culture shock coming to him as well, because he'll be of the Klopp level in terms of pressing and movement. You only have to watch the Ajax team last couple of years. It's been really exciting. But everybody's saying what a huge job he has, and he has. But there's still some good players there, Peter, and he'll know of good players that he can bring to fit his system. Maybe not the highest ranking players that we all talk about, but just guys that he knows can come in and fit the system. I think he'll need a couple of transfer windows and a bit of patience.
Yeah, okay. And to finish, I can't let us finish you without saying on this day in 1972.
In this day in 1972, was it Barcelona?
Rangers won the European Cup Winners' Cup. Yep. And a fabulous night. They were 3-0 up. It looked as if they were coasting, and then they got a wee scare.
I think it was Steen 2 and Johnson, and then Dynamo Moscow came back, scored 2. I was talking to Dave Smith, who
I think Johnson got 2, and then Steen got 1.
Did it? Was the other way around?
The other way around,
sorry. And Dave Smith, who played in that game, said he was always, even at 3-2, he was pretty comfortable that they would win. He was pretty sure they would win. It was some run to the final as well, because the game that I can remember vividly is that they knocked out Bayern Munich in the semi-finals, and Bayern Munich was the Germany World Cup team.
Well, it's a great point you make, because I sat next to, obviously, Derek Johnson for 8 years. Most of it, the two of us laughing our heads off and enjoying ourselves on the programme of Super Scoreboard on Radio Clyde, and it was an absolute joy to just to pick his brains, and for a young man to suddenly be thrust into that final because of, sadly, the injury to Jackson. But he said it was really easy, he says, because Dave Smith just said to me, you get that ball clear, son, and any you miss, I'll shore up behind you. And he says, and that's all he did.
But Johnson was an exceptional player.
Peter. Well, DJ could play centre half, midfield, and centre forward. That's how good he was.
DJ scored in a League Cup final, 16 and 17 as a centre forward. And I once watched him play against Ajax in a sort of almost sweeper come back 3 role, and he did not look out of place there either.
Yeah, absolutely. And it would be remiss of me not to mention my old mucker who used to be my co-commentator at Radio 4th in Sandy Jardine, because he was my favourite player of that era, because his patter was great and he was fantastic as a player. And he could play midfield as well, Sandy.
That's where he started. Well, did he start as a centre forward? I think he may have started as a centre forward, Sandy.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, even better than that. When he joined Hearts, one of the board members said, I didn't realise how good a player you were. He was 37, he won Player of the Year that year. For the whole team, for the whole division. 37 playing for Hearts, incredible. He was a fantastic guy, great patter, dry sense of humour.
It's a credible poignancy when you're talking about the 72 Bears, because again, here's a wee poignant thing. Dave Smith is still a season ticket holder. He comes all the way down from Angus to watch them. And do you know where he sits? He sits in the Sandy Jardine stand. How poignant is that?
Yeah, absolutely. Greatly missed Sandy. Really good sense of humour, but a wonderful player. Listen, we've had a wee trip down memory lane, which is an absolute joy. I thoroughly enjoyed that, Hugh, and fingers crossed we'll be able to do that through the summer. Maybe get you for a couple of wee specials. We'll just talk about football from a bygone era. Do you fancy it?
We're up for that.
Absolutely. Anyway, apart from anything else, thank you to you for actually hitting the subscribe button throughout the season. It's absolutely fantastic. The downloads in the podcast and your thousands, thank you. The subscribers, brilliant. Share it. We've still got time to go all the way to Friday to look ahead to the Champions League final between Liverpool and Real Madrid. Just incidentally, who wins it?
I hope Liverpool.
Yeah, same here. So we've got that to look forward to tomorrow. Tam McManus will be with me here on the couch, and we'll be talking football and all the news that's happening on the Wednesday, so hopefully you can join us for that. Look out for the one-to-one with Steve Clarke, the Scotland manager, coming up, as well as Charlie Adam picks his dream team, which is well worth a view, and there's a few more dream teams that I think you're going to enjoy over the course of the summer months. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. From Hugh MacDonald, from myself, Peter Martin, thank you very much for watching.